Cultural Institute in San Francisco, and I'm very glad to be here with you tonight for this panel, Understanding Made in Italy, with for sure one of the men that has actually promoted Italian brands, quality and excellencies all over the world. A very special guest tonight, Riccardo Illy. Mr. Illy has recently written a new book that you find there, thanks to Libreria Pino, for HarperCollins Leadership Publishing House, entitled The Art of Excellent Products, Enchanting Customers with Premium Brand Experiences. So this book is about personal experience of Mr. Illy as a businessman, using these tried and tested Italian business standards to run his family's world-renowned coffee company for generations. And the book wants to teach entrepreneurs how to approach the research and development process to find ways to add quality to products and brands, understanding how Italians have created so many brands that have stood the test of time, and how to approach the marketplace and become competitive. Some biographical notes on Mr. Illy. He first joined Illy Cafe in 1977 to help reorganize the company's commercial structure. In the 1980s, sorry, can someone close the door, please, because I think people can have different similarities. Sorry about that. Il bello della diretta. In the 80s, as the rest of the coffee industry proliferated into blend after blend, he focused Illy Cafe on producing its flagship blend alone. His emphasis on quality over quantity has more than stood the test of time. He also headed Illy's Cafe marketing and communication efforts and redesigned the brand and became 2004 chairman of Gruppo Illy. In 1993, he was also elected mayor of Trieste and later on also members of Italian parliament, and in 2003 he was elected president of the Friuli Venezia Giulia region and president of the Assembly of European Regions. In addition to these roles, he has held several other prestigious positions with governmental and business organizations across Italy and here as well. He lectures regularly at business schools around the world, from Stanford in the United States to Paris and Trieste, and is the academic director at Italia Innovation, an organization which fosters research, education, and new ventures in the manufacturing economy with a humanistic approach. It's a very long biography. Mr. Illy is nowadays chairman of Polo del Gusto, a company with interest in a number of world-class producers of chocolate, tea, wine, and confections. And Polo del Gusto selects extraordinary companies who share a development idea based on 4 pillars of the so-called qualità prorompente, unbridled quality. So uniqueness, superior raw materials, more efficient production cycles, and sustainability. Tonight, thanks to Polo del Gusto, we will be able to taste some Domori chocolate that you found on your chair and Mastroianni wines. Domori chocolate is considered an excellence in the chocolate world, spokesperson for a new cacao culture with the so-called Progetto Criollo, protecting the rarest and most precious cacao species since 25 years, and basing its development model on short supply chain and quality without compromises. Mastroianni wine is very famous all around the world. They won many awards, and they produce excellent wines in Montalcino. And that's very important for us in the Bay Area because, as some of you may know, last year Napa and Montalcino became sister cities under the auspices of the Italian Consulate General in San Francisco. So before starting, allow me to thank once again Mr. Illy for granting us his presence tonight. I would also like to thank our special moderator tonight, Kathy McCabe, host and executive producer of the hit PBS TV travel series, Dream of Italy. She's the founder and award-winning membership website and magazine Dream of Italy, celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. In 2021, Kathy also released her first book, Dream of Italy, Travel, Transform and Thrive, a companion to her TPS special Dream of Italy, exploring how the healthier and happier Italian lifestyle can help us all transform and live our own Dream of Italy. So before giving the floor to our Consul General Sergio Strozzi, that I thank for being here with us tonight, I would like to thank my staff, Franca Cavallaro and Silvia Veredo, Cafe on Firehouse, and Donato Enoteca for the finger food, and of course Libreria Vino for the books. I would also like to remind you that the IIC San Francisco has changed location, and now it's in Samson Street, North Beach, in the beautiful spaces of the so-called Innovit, the first Italian culture and innovation hub in the world conceived by the Italian Ministry for Foreign Affairs. So come and visit us, follow us on our website, newsletter, social media to keep up to date. And now, with no further ado, I leave the floor to Consul General Sergio Strozzi. Thank you for your attention.
Dear Anna Maria, I'm so grateful to you for organizing this afternoon event. And I'm so, I would say, more than delighted to welcome Riccardo Illy to San Francisco. On behalf of the Italian government, as Consul General of Italy in San Francisco, it's a pleasure to have you here, Riccardo. It's not easy to talk about a star, and Riccardo Illy is a star not only in Italy and in Europe, he's very well known, but also worldwide. It's not easy because you always have to pick up the main, the major features of the personality. And as I don't want to take time from your conversation, I would just like to point out why it's so important to me to have Riccardo Illy here in the very first stage of my tenure here in San Francisco. Not only because we met already in my previous lives in Hungary when I was at the Embassy of Italy in Budapest as Economic Commercial Counselor, and Riccardo Illy being one of the major representatives of Italian politics, the Friuli Venezia Giulia region, former mayor of Trieste, was a great character and personality for in Europe, so also in Budapest, very well known, and of Hungarian also origins and part of his family. But I'm so glad because since the very beginning of my stay here, I always talk about the fact that we have to shift a little bit the image of our country, of Italy, in San Francisco. We need to talk about innovation, as Anna Maria was mentioning. Innovation in every field, also quality, food, entrepreneurship. And I think Riccardo Illy is the best representative and the key speaker, the guest star on this topic, because he's a real modernizer. Since the very beginning of his activity as a businessman, very successful one, but also, let me say, as a politician, when he decided to participate in the Italian politics, you may not know, he's always been, as mayor of Trieste, as president of one of the most important regions in Italy, Friuli Venezia Giulia, so the northeastern part of Italy. A very balanced, very clever, outstanding man and politician, which is very important to talking about politics and politicians, because you always have extremism on one side and on the other side. Riccardo Illy and his let's say, commitment in the politics showed us, as Italian, that you can do politics without being, an extremist. You can do good work, concrete work, real work for citizens and companies without being an extremist. And that's why I'm so glad that you are here as one of the greatest Italian modernizer, not only as a businessman, but also as a politician, in, let me say, in a city which is on the cutting edge of everything, San Francisco. So I think the combination of San Francisco and Riccardo Illy is one of the best combinations I could dream of in this first stage of my tenure here. Thank you so much, Riccardo, for being here with us. Thank again Anna Maria for organizing the Institute of Culture, the Italian Institute of Culture, for organizing this, and thank you all for being here. Thanks a lot.
Boy, that's fun. Welcome to California.
Only a few minutes.
Yes. So it is a great honor can you hear me? It's good? Yeah. It's a great honor also for me to join you tonight, Mr. Illy. You really epitomize the best of Italy, and we always think about Italy and its history and its storied past, but you're also part of its future. And if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend the book. I was surprised, and surprise is something you talk about as an essential feature, but it's a really easy, breezy read. It doesn't feel like a business book, and that's because you're a storyteller. And you explain in the book how every business has a great story. And we'll talk more about that. But I'd like to start, I feel like someone famous said, or in a book, let's start where it began. But at Trieste, I love how you began your book talking about the place that you're from, because I think everything in Italy goes back to place. So how has this city informed you as a person and as a businessman?
Thank you so much. Now it works. Thank you. Thank you, first of all, to the Italian General Consulate, to the Italian Cultural Institute in San Francisco for organizing this event. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you also to all the people that attended the event for being here. I was born in Trieste, which is a city of pre-Roman origins. So the Romans, you know, gave us mainly two opportunities as a population, and these are still, I would say, the two main competitive advantages of our country and of the Italian population. One is genius, because the Romans were very capable in building. They built roads, they built bridges, that many of them still exist. They built theater. We have a Roman theater with about 5,000 seats, and that means that at that time the city had already 50,000 inhabitants. That 2,000 years ago was a huge number. Now you would say it would be only a village. After the Roman time, the Romans also give us the second important heritage, which is, let's say, aesthetics, the love for beauty. The picture you have on the cover of the book is a mosaic, not of Roman origin. This is a mosaic produced right now by Bisazza, an Italian excellent company, but you can still find mosaics built 2,000 years ago that are simply huge, simply wonderful. And the Romans were really so attentive in aesthetics in all the aspects. By the way, they already produced wine, and I am living in Trieste in a village called Prosecco, a village that allowed to, let's say, save the name Prosecco that we were risking to lose, as we lost the name of the, now it's called Friulano, once it was Tokai Friulano. Because in Hungary there is a county called Tokai that had got finally the right of using the name Tokai. So the Romans were already growing the grapes of Glera, which is the grape used to make the Prosecco. And these were grown a few meters from the house I'm living in right now. After the Roman Empire time, during the medieval, Trieste almost disappeared, but then it became big, important again during another empire, the Austro-Hungarian. And it was the main port for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And by the way, Vienna with Venice and Paris in the 17th century were the city where the coffee consumption started. In Vienna, after the Turk occupation, let's say, when the Turks left Vienna, they left a huge quantity of coffee, and so the Viennese people learned to consume coffee, and after some decades the consumption of coffee spread all over Europe. But Trieste again was the port where coffee arrived for the whole Austro-Hungarian Empire, so it really specialized in coffee. Trade, but also production and consumption. And that's the reason my grandfather, Francesco, that was born in Temesvar, at that time Hungary, but after the First World War became Romania, decided to open his company, to found his company in 1933 for the coffee and chocolate production. And my grandfather had the idea of producing the best coffee in the world. And so he committed himself, in one hand, of finding the best way to buy the best raw material and then to process it in the best way, but also to protect, to give a packaging for the coffee. At that time, in 1930s, coffee was still often sold as raw, as a green coffee, and the people roasted by himself at home. So he had to invent a system to protect the coffee and sell it and send it all over Italy. And imagine in 1939, so a few years later, he founded his first coffee abroad, a coffee company abroad, called Illy Cafe with only one F in Switzerland. That was roasting, packaging, and selling the coffee. So he invented what we still use as a technology called pressurization. So he built tins in metal, in steel, with a perfectly sealed system. He put inside the coffee, took out the air and substituted the air with inner gas, and then closed the packaging. As far as in the tin there were no air, no oxygen, you could keep the quality of the coffee. And we still use this technology, and now we produce still the coffee in Trieste. We sell it in about 145 countries, even if it takes 2-3 months. Now with the sea congestion, even one more, it doesn't matter because it will only improve its quality, as it happened with the red wines. So I passed all my life in a wonderful city. It is also very beautiful in terms of architecture, with a lot of neoclassic buildings built during the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And in the good time, with the good weather, we can see the mountains from Trieste. And by the way, you can drive in 1.5 hours and reach the mountain. Some friend of mine sometimes call each other and say, let's go skiing in the middle of the morning. And at maybe 12 or 1 p.m., they arrive and they ski all the afternoon, and they come back in the same day. This is something you cannot even imagine in the United States. So a beautiful city with a lot of traditional cafes, and let's say that the quality affected all my life in the city, in the, let's say, neighborhood with the beauties, the natural beauties like the karst, the sea, in my family where we always consumed excellent products starting from the coffee. Chocolate, by the way, was abandoned after the Second World War, my grandfather. So he continued only with coffee. My father, when he took over in the middle of the years 60, decided to produce also a tea. And later on, I decided to discontinue this production to focus on coffee that represented more than 98% of the sales. And only in 2004, I started the diversification, becoming the chairman of Gruppo Illy, which is our family company. But Trieste is a wonderful city with the biggest square right on the sea, where you have the city hall, the building of the region, where I stayed for some years, and the building of the government. So on the three sides of the square, the biggest on the sea, you have the three main entities that represents the public administration. I also service as a civil servant in the three.
So one of my favorite one of my favorite books at all, or I'd say the best travel book, is this book, Trieste and the Meaning of Nowhere by Jan Marks. And it's crazy, 20 years ago or so, I came to a travel writing conference at Book Passage, not far from here, and she was speaking, and I still have not been to Trieste, even though I've been to Italy 50 or 60 times. I think I've been saving it. And I think our next TV season, we're going to do an episode, because it just represents so much that's magical about Italy and the diversity of Italy, like this gem. But you talk about in the book especially, and I love this about Italy, what differentiates Italian companies. One thing is they're family run. I think I read somewhere it's like 70% of businesses, probably more, are family run. And what advantage do you think that gives sort of the Made in Italy brand?
There are several advantages, but also some disadvantages in family-owned companies, of course. The main advantages are heritage, because often these families started their activity many years ago. I always cite Beretta, for example, or Antinori, Beretta producing weapons, Antinori producing wines. Their story is about 600 years. And the companies grown and grew, and so now they are quite big and important, and they are still controlled by the family and run by the family. By the way, at Antinori, for the first time by a female, as you know, because you met her, and so this demonstrates the capability of the family also to change and to interpret the new times. The second good, important advantage is the commitment that a person having the same name of the company will have in giving really the best he can to let the company grow. A manager maybe will be incentivized by the bonuses at the end of the year, but the commitment you can put in the company, in your company, having the same name you are bringing, is for sure much bigger. And so the main aspect, the most important aspect, is the possibility to commit the company in long-term projects. Normally, big companies, public companies are looking at the first quarter. In a family company, you are used to think in terms of generation. That means in terms of 20 years. And in some sectors, like the wine sector, this is vital. We have a winery in Montalcino, so we produce Brunello di Montalcino. If we plant, so we make an investment in a new vineyard this year, we will get the first revenues after 10 years, because it takes about 5 years for the vineyard to produce the first harvest, the first, let's say, full harvest, and then additional 5 years to be able to sell them, following the regulation of the Brunello di Montalcino. We are selling now the 2017, so after 5 years of the harvest. So in a company looking to the next quarter, it is almost impossible to only think making an investment to get the first revenues after 10 years. And I would add, to produce quality takes time. So you have to invest, to research, to understand, to find, as Anna Maria said, the best raw material existing. You have to find the best process to keep the best quality of the raw material you are using. And this takes a lot of time. So a family company is the best, let's say, organization for doing this. On the other side of the corner, there is the fact that normally a member of the family expect to become not only shareholders, this probably is in his right, depending on the rules of the states, but he expects also to have the right of becoming a manager and possibly also a director, and one of the members, the chairman or the CEO of the company. And this is not something that has to be automatic. So in our family company, we have a kind of statute where it is clearly written that the members of the family will have only the right of becoming shareholders. But to become a manager or a director, they have to be put in competition with, let's say, outsiders, so other managers or directors that are not members of the family. And this is vital to allow the company of growth. And so not all the Italian family controlled company are doing this, and you have many that remain small. And I would say, you know that Italian was famous saying small is beautiful. In America you were saying big is beautiful. I think that beautiful is growing. A company is like an organism, and each organism, as ourselves, will feel good if it is growing. For ourselves, more growing in terms of, let's say, intellectual growth, but the company needs to grow. So you have to put the company in the condition to grow. And that means open it first to external managers and directors, and why not also to external shareholders. So I cite the example of Zegna that had been listed a few weeks ago at the New York Stock Exchange. It is controlled by the family, but they opened their capital to the American shareholders. And I think this will guarantee Zegna to grow further and to become even more important company. Still controlled by the family, but not 100%. You don't need to control the company 100%. And by the way, also at Illy Cafe, last year we opened the capital, so we have now Ron Capital, which is an American fund who has 20% of the capital. And also in Polo del Gusto, I'm in these months, let's say, looking for a financial partner.
So you wrote this book at an incredibly difficult time in the world, and I think you refer to the pandemic in the book. How are Italian companies doing getting through this? And what, those that are doing well, what do you think helps them survive such a change in the world?
The pandemic brought a lot of problems to the people and also to the company. So an entire city changed. Imagine when all the employees were working from home, how empty was a city like Milan. So all the companies working in the services had to close or to reduce their activities. And the companies serving these companies like bars or restaurants or hotels suffered also of the decrease in the sales to this kind of customers. And also as citizens, as persons, we had to change our habits. Many had to work from home, and that means to reinvent the way of working. And other working in the production had to continue to go to the factories and to continue the production. The companies that were able to overcome these tough times were the ones able, first of all, of adapt, of changing. We will make an example. Changing, I wouldn't say the strategy, but for sure the tactic they were using in these times. And the second was the capability of having, let's say, reserves. So some money apart, or at least the possibility to get money from the banks in an extra way compared to normal times. At Omori, for example, in the 2020, which was the year most hit by the pandemic, we lost less than 5% of the sales. Many companies in Italy lost 20, 30, 40%. They were really in troubles. So we were able to do this in few, I would say, weeks, not even months, to start a new production with private label. So we are not distributing our chocolate in supermarkets. We only serve, let's say, specialty stores or patisserie, let's say, only high-level retail market. But we decided to produce to the supermarket chain with their own label. And thanks to these new activities, we were able to survive in one hand, and secondly, to lose only 5% of the sales. And the year after, so 2021, to grow close to 40% in terms of sales. And also the good relationships with banks allowed us to get loans despite the tough times. But it happened also that many companies weren't able to do this, so they had to close. But this reinforced the companies that remained, because they were able to buy all the companies that were going to close, or at least to get their customers. So this allowed the companies that survived to grow faster. And so they were also, if it seems absurd, they were able to reinforce their position during the pandemic. So I would say that now the Italian companies are stronger than they were in 2019 in the pre-pandemic time.
Very interesting. And in the book, we're here to talk about, well, what makes made in Italy so special, and why, when we're choosing, especially at the supermarket, to buy something, we buy the Italian, the made in Italy. You have a philosophy, and it's called Incanto, a beautiful word. Can you tell us what that is and how that gives Italians an advantage?
So a few years ago, I read a book, and the title is The Three Rules. And they made a survey in the United States over thousands of companies to understand what did they do to grow more than the market for a long, long time. So there is the story of American companies having more than 100 years of story. And it came out that the three rules are the first, better before cheaper. The second is revenues before cost. And the third rule is there are no other rules. So in reality, the three rules are just two. So I try to understand what the Italian top quality companies in different sectors, from fashion to furniture to food and wine, were making to maintain their top quality production. And I was asked by Italian Innovation to organize a summer school in Verona for students coming from all over the world, from the best universities, also Stanford and Harvard, to mention only two. And I called the course that lasted 4 weeks, and we had lessons in the class and then visit to companies, disruptive quality. But I translated then this name in Incanto, which is much better, much more positive. And I explained to the students what the companies that then we visited were doing. And it came out that they are following four elements. The first, they are committed in producing goods whose quality, which quality, has to be understood by the consumer, even if it is not an expert. So normally this company makes blind tests with their products, and they look if in reality the majority of the consumers tasting different brands, different kind of products, will detect their product as the one with the highest level of quality. We do it quite often. The second point is they use the best raw material. So at Domori, for example, we use the Criollo species of cocoa that is almost disappeared because all the growers discovered that the other species called Forastero has a much higher productivity, even if the quality is lower, and so they abandoned Criollo and switched to Forastero. So we are saving the Forastero species. We have two plantations, one in Venezuela and the second is in Ecuador. We are the biggest producer of Criollo cocoa right now, and we will grow further in the future. But Zegna only acquires the best wool that exists. And by the way, they organize every year a trophy to get the best wool by the producers, and they give a prize to the producers that are getting the best quality every year. And I copied this in the year 90, so I organized the trophy for the coffee growers starting from Brazil. And I remember the first year we had more than 1,000 growers participating to the trophy. And this allowed us to get in direct contact with them, so to buy directly the best coffee lots by them, and then to visit them with an agronomist, to teach them how to improve the quality, but also reduce the impact on the environment. The third point, I discovered that normally the process used to transform the best raw material is different and incompatible with the one used by the mass market companies. So normally to produce chocolate you have, after the roasting of the beans, three phases. One is grinding, then refining, and then conching. Grinding doesn't need explanation. Refining, you use cylinder machine to reduce the particle of the cocoa, but you can reach, let's say, 18, 20 microns with the cylinder machine. And conching means you add the other ingredients and then you mix the chocolate for hours, up to 3 days, 72 hours, to all the ingredients get homogeneous. We make it completely different at Domori. We have a single phase. We use sphere mills or ball mills. It's a cylinder full of stainless steel balls mixed by electric engines, and there we make the three phases all together. It lasts only 8 hours. Instead of doing it at 85 degrees Celsius, we do it at 45, and this allows us not to lose the best flavors of the chocolate. And the fourth pillar of Incanto is sustainability. I tell you the example of Zegna again. When the grandfather of Gildo Zegna, which is now the chairman of the company, started the production and built the first factory, he had to cut some trees, and he decided immediately to replant them. Imagine, this happened close to 100 years ago. And then he understood that he also had to commit himself with the local population. So he built facilities like a swimming pool for the town where Zegna is based. And he then understood that he needed to let the production be sustainable also in terms of the environment, in terms of the CO2 production. And so now they are doing everything is possible to reduce pollution and the environmental impact. At Illy Cafe we are already a B Corp. Domori is under process to become a B Corp. I hope they will conclude the process within the end of the year. And also Daman Frère, which is our tea company in France, is going to start the process to becoming a B Corp. So for us, sustainability is really vital.
That's incredible. So I was really touched, and it always comes back to family and legacy and history with Italy. It's almost something you can't escape. And I love how you talk about how Italians often buy a product because their grandparents bought it. But I also think that applies to Italian products all over the world, because I remember my grandmother, who was a widowed school teacher. She would save up in New York City to buy Ferragamo shoes. And I've bought Ferragamo shoes, and it continues, and it seems like, and I hope this continues, we, especially Italians, when we filmed something about fashion, they don't have huge closets like we have built in here. In the United States, they have armoires, so everything they buy is of high quality. And so I'm really struck that we live here where, and nothing against it, I love TJ Maxx, but you can go and buy shirts for $25. It's almost a throwaway society. And I'm curious if you feel like Italy continues to hold those traditions.
I would say yes, absolutely. And I will start from Theodore Leavitt, who is a professor at Harvard. He wrote very few books, but one I read is wonderful, Marketing Imagination. And he wrote that you have three kinds of qualities, three levels of quality. The lowest one is the required quality, the minimum level that you would accept. If you go below, you would refuse to consume the product. At the higher level, you have the expected quality. So the one you are just expecting. You buy a sandwich, you expect that it is soft, that it is rightly salted, that it has also the right content of nutrient substances. So this is the expected quality. But at a higher level, you have augmented quality. So something that is going to surprise the consumer. So you are expecting something and you find something more than you were expecting. When you arrive to augmented quality, you normally do not change anymore, because it's not easy to find another product giving you the same satisfaction. If you buy just expected quality, one brand gives you the same satisfaction than another or a third one. So sometimes you just change because you will find more convenient prices, lower prices, or maybe more convenient in terms of use products. So probably when your mother arrived to Ferragamo, he found, I met Mr. Ferragamo, they are also at the third generation if I remember well, and I also say something in the book if I remember well regarding Ferragamo, and your mother found a superior quality, so augmented quality, and it is typical of the Italian families to transmit this transition, this tradition from one generation to the other. So I'm not surprised that you are acquiring also the Ferragamo products. And I met many people telling me I consume your coffee at home, and my father and my grandfather already did. And it's quite normal in Italy, maybe not that much in the United States, so you can be considered an exception, but maybe this is due to your Italian origins.
Well, you talk about it, and I want to come to Trieste and go to the Illy Coffee University. And then you have a chocolate, do you do a chocolate? You talk about education, so maybe, yes, I've been to like the Ferragamo shop in Florence and the museum, and I'm an educated consumer. And I went and I made chocolate at Perugina and Perugia, and I'm fascinated with, if you teach the consumer, how does that make a difference?
So when you consume an expected quality product, you are not so much interested in knowing more about it. You just expect to have a quality that is satisfying your needs, and that's all. But when we are talking about augmented quality products, first, the consumer are curious, and often they are willing to know more, to understand how the quality of this product were able to surprise them. But also the company has the interest to tell the school story, and so to explain how this superior quality was reached. That's the reason we founded the University of Coffee at Illy Cafe. And by the way, my first book that I wrote in the years 80, the title was From Coffee to Espresso, was written exactly for this purpose. But previously I became a journalist, and I wrote some tens of articles on a magazine called Bar Giornale, so bar newspaper. It was a monthly publication and monthly magazine. And in each article I wrote one small piece of the story, because we were the first company saying our blend is 100% Arabica. But I immediately understood that our customers didn't know what Arabica means. So there are two species of coffee, as there are two main species of chocolate. In chocolate we also have the hybrid called the Trinitario. And we only use the best called Arabica. And so I started telling the story of the two species and how you grow the coffee. And finally I arrived to how you should prepare at best a cup of perfect espresso. For a chocolate, we found that with other companies and people, the International Institute for Chocolatier. Chocolatier is a neologism. It's a sommelier of chocolate, as you can easily understand. And the purpose of this institute is to tell the full story, and also to train the people on how to taste at best the chocolate, to get the maximum satisfaction by the chocolate consumption.
And I've done that for olive oil, and it's sort of like wine. We became educated in wine, and then I've seen lots of people who travel to Italy learning how to taste olive oil, and then being willing to buy the higher quality, usually more expensive product. But there's a couple things we can't talk about made in Italy or Italy without covering, and we could have talked all night about beauty, which I think Italy invented beauty pretty much. But it seems like every Italian product has to embody beauty in some way. It's almost demanded by the consumer. And so how have you incorporated beauty in your products, and or some examples of products we love that have?
So you are right, that beauty is in the Italian DNA thanks to the Romans, and we are descendants of the Romans. And beauty is so important because with the eye we get the highest number of information of the environment surrounding us. Of course we can also hear, we can taste, we can smell, but the highest number of information we get through the eyes. So even if we produce goods like food or wine that we really appreciate mainly with our mouth and with our nose, so with taste and with the flavor, the sight is so important, because the first impression we will have of a product won't be the smell or the taste, but will be the kind of packaging. Is it beautiful? Is it attractive? We probably will decide to taste it. It's ugly, it's not well balanced, the colors are not beautiful, we probably will simply refuse it. And I tell you a short story of my first course on wine. I was hosted at the house of Luigi Brunelli, that was a journalist, a writer, editor, so he was a publisher as well. He had in his house a cellar with about 50,000 bottles, so it was huge. And we were a group of about 10 persons. And I remember the first and also the last tasting we did. The first were in black glasses. And let's say the instructor, the teacher, the trainer was Giorgio Brai, an enologist. He passed away a few years ago. And he said, you have just to taste and try to understand what is in the glass. So the glasses were black, so you couldn't understand even the color. You could only smell and taste. So I started tasting. One was Coke, one was chamomilla, one was tea, one was beer, hot, by the way, at the same room temperature. And finally, two were wines. Taste, retaste. I thought they are the same. But then I thought they can't be the same. There has to be a difference. So I tasted again, and finally I felt a small astringency in one of the two. I was used tasting coffee. In coffee, astringency is always a defect. And so I thought astringency is related with tannins. Tannins are only in the red wine, so this will be the red one, and the other will be the white wine. And I was right, by the way. But this gave me the idea of how important is the sight.
That's incredible.
Because when you taste a red and a white wine and you see it, you feel they are completely different. They are not. The difference is given by your eyes, not by your nose. And try to taste it if you have black glasses at home, or do it in a room without light, and you will see how similar are white and red wines.
That's a good event, blindfolded. Are we going to do questions from the audience, or should I continue? I wanted to ask you one more thing, though. This is so Italian. If any of you cook out there, make Italian recipes, you call it the short recipe, which is true in cooking, but how is that true in Italian products?
When the raw materials are the best, you need not to add so many other ingredients. I give you the example of the chocolate. You will have the opportunity to taste, maybe when you are home, or if you are curious, also immediately. If you look at the label, there are only two ingredients in this chocolate. One is cocoa mass, and the second is cane sugar. Why cane? Because it is coming from the same countries the cocoa is coming from. That is the idea. Otherwise, you could also just use sugar. In all the other chocolate, you will also find, first of all, cocoa butter. Cocoa butter has no taste, no flavor. So it's like adding water in the wine. You would never add water in a Brunello di Montalcino, I think. So why should we add cocoa butter in Criollo chocolate? We don't do it. Then you find soy lecithin that is added mainly for facilitate the production process. But we can produce also without soy lecithin, so we don't use it. Then you normally find vanilla, or even worse, vanillin, which is, let's say, synthetic vanilla, and often other flavors. And also allowed by the, at least European law, also other vegetal fats. All these ingredients are changing not so much the taste, but mainly the flavor of the chocolate. And you don't need them if you are using the best raw materials. And also in some Italian dishes, like pasta al pomodoro, you have only 3-4 ingredients. Pasta, of course, you need some salt, you put in the water before cooking the pasta. Then you have the tomato sauce, and then you will put some olive oil. Maybe you can add some parmigiano or a small piece of basil. But few ingredients.
And
You
the
need
basil.
not to add many others. And it is a perfect dish.
The basilico.